Stand up, South Africa. Make sure that South Africa, you are counted with me. Run, South Africa. Stand and make sure that our people understand that the need to bring revolution in South Africa is guaranteed. That under the EFF, this country will be the better. EFF is a tobateng.
I have cast my vote on the 29th of May. As you can see here, my nail is inked. I definitely believe you have done so as well, Mr. Tselane.
Yes, voting is a very important opportunity for a person to express their view about the political situation in the country, and therefore I took advantage of that opportunity.
And your overall impression when you look at the 2024 national and provincial elections, particularly the electoral processes, what are your observations?
Well, this was a hotly contested election. The contestation between the political parties was very intense. It was robust. But there was a certain level of maturity coming from the level of political parties in terms of how they help to create an environment conducive to free and fair elections. And I think they need to be commended for them. From the side of the electoral administration, the IC has done well, but I think they could have done much better. There are some elementary mistakes that were happening that should not have been there. The fact that some of the electoral staff appeared not to be well trained. They did not understand what to do when there were having some crisis. When the device that they are using to check people on the voters roll, when it was not working, some of them did not know that they could actually rely on manual processes. So there was an over-reliance on the technology that did not work.
Flip. And thus compromises the credibility of the elections. But we're going to dip more into that, Mr. Tselane. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Titus Tsungu. We're coming to you from Winnie Madikizela Mandela House here in Johannesburg. Today, we're joined by Mr. Terry Tselane, the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa, for an analysis on the post-election situation. Mr. Tselane, thank you very much for making time here on the EFF podcast. Good to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, you've already painted a picture that the situation at the IEC, or the manner in which the IEC is handling these elections, to some extent, is clumsy. And we have seen a number of reports suggesting that there were delays, there have been protests, there have been glitches when it comes to the execution of the IEC mandate, thus seeing some people not being able to participate in these electoral processes. Now, where do these challenges emanate from? And with your experience, would you say the IEC could have done better?
Absolutely, I think the IC could have done better. We've got to say firstly that the election, it's a massive operation and therefore requires really resources, and both in terms of capital and human, to be able to pull off such a great campaign. And the IC did well in terms of being able to pull it off. However, there were some elementary mistakes that happened that should not have been there. The fact that the electoral staff appeared not to be well trained, or they were ill prepared for this operation.
Yes.
There was an over-reliance on the device that they were using, the technology that they were using to check the registry of people on the roll. And then I think that nearly collapsed the system, and that's why you ended up really having all these long queues. So I think those could have been avoided.
And now, when we look at the credibility of the elections, considering the reports that have been made, we understand there have been arrests, there have been those glitches. How does that affect the credibility of the elections? And would you say the 2024 national and provincial elections were free and fair, or is it too early to say?
It's still too early to say. There are quite a number of things that we're going to have to take into consideration. We've got to check what actually happens now during the results capturing process and the projection of those results. But all in all, I think, as I've indicated, that the Commission has done what it could, manage those challenges that I have already mentioned, and they've been able to provide a platform that produces a result. And the fact that we are now watching the projection of the results, it's a clear illustration that they've been able to do a good job in terms of making sure that people are able to express their will.
Section 24A seems to have an impact on the electoral outcome. And as it were, a lot of people, some couldn't vote because they couldn't be at the polling station where they were registered. Now, what sort of impact does Section 24A have on the election outcome, and what can be done to sort of improve the status quo?
I think communication, I think vote education would have played an important role in terms of basically informing people about this process, so that people do not think that they can go anywhere and still be able to cast a vote. I'm one of those people who really support Section 24A. And the reason why I support it is because I've always wanted consistency between local government elections and national provincial elections. As you may be aware, that in local government elections, you vote where you are registered. But when it came to national provincial elections, there was this inconsistency. And I think it is that inconsistency that has actually created this confusion. But if people knew from the beginning that in an election, you vote where you are registered, there was not going to be this confusion. And I think also it helps in terms of certainty, in terms of planning the logistics, because you know how many people will be at a particular voting station. You can't be running the elections when you don't know how many people are going to be there, because your materials and distribution of materials dependent on the number of people who will be at the voting station during that period.
So would you say the 2024 elections have sort of denied some people to participate by virtue of them not being able to vote?
It is possible that it disadvantaged other people because other people left their provinces with the understanding that they could actually vote anywhere. But what we don't know at the moment is the impact that does have. In other words, we don't know how many people would have been affected by this, but definitely it would have had an effect in terms of some of the people who were probably not going to be at their voting station on the day of the elections.
You have been part and parcel of the IEC. Comparatively, have you seen something like this in terms of your observation, the turnout, the appetite for people to go out and vote in their numbers? Comparative speaking, how would you describe the 2024 elections?
National and provincial elections always attract higher attention and interest. And therefore, one had expected that still there was going to be a high level of interest in these elections. But also, if you look at the number of political parties that were registered, and the fact that now you had independents also coming in, was also going to generate its own interest. And I had expected the voter turnout to be much higher, but it appears as though it's going to end up around 60%, which is really consistent with the national and provincial elections of the past.
But why is that the case, Mr. Tselane? When I look at previous elections, it is always the case. You find that the registered population is always higher. In this case, in the 2024 elections, around over 27 million people were registered to vote. In 2014, around 26 million were registered to vote. But when we look at the turnout, around more than 17 million were able to cast their ballots. Now, why is it that when we go to the ballots, there is a lower turnout in terms of the registered population?
I think we need to do a proper scientific research to be able to establish why. In the past, we used to say that it is probably a protest vote, that people say, in any case, even though I'm registered, my vote doesn't really make a difference, and therefore I'm not going to go to the voting stations. Or sometimes people will say, I want to punish a particular political party because maybe those who have been in governance have not been doing things accordingly. But we need to have really a proper scientific analysis so that we don't just guess, what people think in relation to this and then what contributes to this. There could also be the fact that, like you correctly pointed out at the beginning, that some people are not at the voting station on the day of the elections. They may have registered in one area, and then now, if on the day of the elections they are elsewhere, that will also have an effect in terms of voter turnout. But I think the most important thing is for us to do a proper scientific analysis, especially after these elections, because there was an expectation that this election was going to attract much more higher voter turnout than it has actually done.
Yeah. With voting halfway through, over 50% now, is it still too early to tell whether we are headed for an outright majority or a coalition sort of government?
I think one can say really with confidence that we are going to end up with a coalition.
Okay.
What the margin is going to be, whether how many parties will be required, it is the only thing that still has to be determined.
And obviously, the EFF has been on an upward trajectory in terms of its performance. In 2014, the EFF got around 6%. In 2019, it got over 10%. And now, as it were, the EFF, it's moving. What can you say about the trend of the EFF? We understand that the EFF has been on an upward trajectory.
EFF has done extremely well. And now remember that there's a new situation that the EFF and other political parties are dealing with. You've got now the MK into the fold. That MK is going to have an impact in the general landscape in South Africa. So I would say if the EFF can still maintain what it did, what it achieved last time, that would actually be a major achievement, because you must remember that some of the people who supported the EFF would now find that MK also still represents their interest, and then they would probably shift to MK. MK will also get people from the ANC because that's where traditionally it comes from. And so there is minor differences, if you like, between what the MK would stand for and what the EFF would stand for.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, that would also have an effect in terms of creating some kind of confusion.
Yeah.
So, but if the EFF can manage just to maintain what it has, given the fact that there is this new kid on the block, I think it would be a major achievement.
Yeah.
But so far, so good. The results are showing that it is possible that it can still maintain what it has.
Indeed, because if you check, now we are 50% in terms of counting, and there's still voting or votes that are expected from the metros. So obviously the EFF will capitalize from that, and most definitely the EFF will perform well in these elections. So the fighters must just rest assured that the EFF has done everything humanly possible, crisscrossed across the country. So South Africans are the ones who decide. Now, let's look at the role of international observers. I've seen the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, as well as the former president of Nigeria, Mr. Goodluck Jonathan. What role do they play essentially in these elections?
Election observers are important. They play a role of auditors, if you like, internal auditors. So they go all out there, then they check whether the elections are being run in line with internationally accepted principles and also in line with the country's laws and constitution. And where they find that there's malfeasance or things that are inconsistent, they will raise those issues. So they play a role really of auditors, but also their role is to legitimize the electoral processes because their voice carries a lot of weight as independent people who are not really running the elections, when they come and express an opinion about the quality of those elections, it does carry a lot of weight. So they are an important factor in the management of the elections, and the commissions normally what they would do after the observers have given their reports, they'll go through those reports, have workshops, and try to see how they can incorporate those aspects that have been raised to improve their processes.
The IEC experienced budget cuts. Would you say these are some of the factors that contributed to some of the delays, of the glitches that were experienced?
I really wouldn't say so. I think the only area that would have been affected by a budget cut would most probably be voter education. And that was a problem. But in terms of the logistics, they had 85,000 more staff than they normally have. And this staff were people who were going to be only responsible for counting to alleviate the exhaustion from the team that would have been working the whole day. So they had more staff. The technology that they using was there, so they did not have to buy new technology or a voting machine device. So I don't think there was an area that would have been compromised as a result of that, particularly in relation to logistics.
Talking about voter education is quite central. We have seen the EFF doing that, encouraging people to vote, especially the youth. What is it that the IEC ought to have done to bolster awareness around voting?
There is a lot of work that the IEC could have done, obviously in partnership with civil society organizations and the political parties. But as you correctly pointed out, there are quite a number of processes that the electorate did not understand. They did not understand the Section 24A. They did not understand this three-ballot paper thing. They don't understand why we have now independence and how independents are impacting on this. I mean, I'm still fielding questions from people who say, what is this regional ballot? And from quite a sophisticated corner. So you realize that if people who are supposedly educated do not understand how this ballot paper system operates and then why we have a regional ballot, you can imagine with ordinary person in rural areas or in a township there who might not have access to information. So it's an issue. They could have done a lot in terms of educating people about many processes. But I think another disadvantage that the Commission had here was Parliament. That Parliament passed laws quite late in the day. After the proclamation of the day of the elections, they were still debating certain aspects that are related to the electoral processes. Now you can imagine when you go into an election, you need firstly a proper legal framework within which those elections are going to be taking place. When you produce your material for voter education, you need to have included everything about that election. Now, if you produce the material and 3 weeks before the elections, there is a legislation that is passed on party funding and issues of independence, that begins to compromise the process as well. So going forward, I think Parliament must also realize their influence in terms of the electoral processes, that there has to be a proper legal framework long before the elections, because that information needs to be put into voter education materials.
And what is the impact of party funding in an election? Does it have some sort of influence on the outcome of the election or how a party can actually perform?
Absolutely. I mean, an election is a massive operation. So, in order for a political party to be able to manage these processes, they require massive infrastructure and resources. And party funding is therefore important in terms of enabling political parties to play their role, to be able to mobilize their support base and then get people to understand the process and be able to go to the voting stations. So if political parties do not have sufficient resources, it will definitely have a negative impact in terms of the capacity of that political party to reach its constituency.
Now, what can we expect? The IEC is set to announce officially the results on Sunday. Is it well within its timeframes?
Yes, in terms of the legislation, the Commission has got 7 days within which to announce the results of the elections after the voting closed. So the fact that traditionally it has always been on the third day, I think is commendable. But remember also that the Commission cannot announce the results within 48 hours. And the reason why they cannot announce the results within 48 hours is because the legislation prohibits that. It wants the Commission to deal with what we call Section 55 objections, which are objections, objections material to the outcome of the results of the elections. So once they've dealt with those within those 48 hours, it is then that they can announce the results. But they've got 7 days within which to make that announcement.
What are the conditions that may necessitate objections? We understand that there have been reports of a ballot box that was lost in KZN, which I would like to believe may raise eyebrows, and also some political parties may feel that the elections have been compromised.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are the Section 55 objections. Any irregularity related to issues like this, remember what the legislation says. It says ballot papers must be kept by the Commission for 6 months.
Yes.
And the reason why they've got to keep the ballot papers for 6 months, it is because if there is an objection and a person wants to go and recount, they've got to be able to have a box where they can actually open in the presence of party agents. But if now the box does not exist, how will they be able to confirm that indeed what is reflected is what is in the box? So those are some of the things that could be raised. Yeah.
The CSIR predictions, is it anything to go by? They have already predicted their own election outcomes.
Yeah, CSIR over the years has been using this. I think this is the 4th election. I was privy to their modeling processes, and they've never really been off the mark. So I trust their predictions. Obviously, they will tell you that there is a margin of error of about 2% either way, either up or down. And apart from that, there would be new entrants that have not actually been catered for, because what they do, their modeling is based on data from the past elections, and then they are able to make a prediction based on that data. But if there are new entrants, sometimes they find it difficult to predict unless there is sufficient data that can actually be able to assist them. But this time around, I think they've also been able to factor the MK, because MK has been an important factor in this election.
Beyond the announcement of these election results, given they are free and fair and there are no objections, what is expected to happen from a legislative or government point of view?
So what should happen now is that in terms of the legislation, Parliament has got to convene within 14 days after the declaration of the results. And from there, the Chief Justice obviously has got to swear all those people. They've got to be sworn in, and then after that, Parliament, in terms of Section 86, has got to elect the president, and the president must be elected within 30 days after the declaration of the results of the elections. If the president is not elected, or if there's no agreement amongst the political parties for the person who's going to become the president, then after 30 days, the president must call for a new election.
So, as it were, as we look at the current situation, by the looks of things, there's no outright majority, and you have correctly pointed out that the likelihood is that we're going to have a coalition. Now, it is up to the parties to decide who then becomes a president. And as you would know, there are leftist parties, there are right-wing political parties. So the election outcome will then determine which political parties may form a coalition, given their numbers.
Absolutely. So you've got two options, and those are the only options. South Africa has long passed now the stage of a center party. There is not going to be any center party. It's either there's going to be a left-leaning government or a right-wing government. It's just going to depend on who is actually going to be a part of that coalition.
Ideologically, I know you're independent, but looking at South Africa as a South African citizen, which system of government does South Africa deserve? A socialist or a capitalist government or system?
Well, I think that's a question that must be decided by the electorate. But I think a mixed economy is the kind of the economy that would really work. That would be able to provide opportunities for people. If you look at the Nordic countries in particular, you find that they've been able to do the redress in terms of some of the issues that are affecting their communities. There's been actually nationalization of quite a number of key areas of economy, and then they're able to use that to address the needs of their communities.
As an alternative to ensure that not a lot of people are affected by Section 24A, is online voting something the IEC should look into, a situation where people can vote online?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a strongest proponent of electronic voting. In fact, when I was part of the commission, we had commissioned a top study for electronic voting. We got the political parties together in 2015 to explore this possibility, to try to get their buy-in. By that time, it was only the DA and the ANC that were against electronic voting. But as you know now, even the DA ran its last conference electronically. And the ANC is also beginning to explore possibilities of introducing electronic processes in their voting arrangement. And I think the EFF will definitely also move in that direction. So it appears to me that there is a push towards electronic voting, and the commission will have to move in that direction. All tertiary institutions now, except Sefako Makato, the university, are actually on electronic voting for SRC elections.
And that's what also the Institute of Election Management Services stand for. It's a new ball game altogether.
It's a new ball game. It's a new ball game. We advocate for innovation, new technologies being used, and then I think the country is going to be moving in that direction ultimately.
So quite definitely by Sunday, we're going to hear the final results.
Definitely Sunday, the results will be here.
Anything you wish to say to South Africans watching?
I think it's commendable that the South African came out in great numbers to participate in this process. The task ahead is still difficult. we still have to structure this country, make sure that we are able to create an environment that is going to benefit the majority of people. The issue of inequality, unemployment, and poverty are problems that no one can actually just ignore, because there's just ripple effects that this has in our lives. So let's support the democratic processes. Let's make sure that those people that we elect will be able to help in terms of address those issues.
Okay, Mr. Tselane, thank you very much for making time for us. I understand you are very busy. You took your time out of your busy schedule, so we really appreciate for making time and making sense of the election as it unfolds.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was Mr. Tselane from the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa. It's a new ball game altogether. So fighters, let's remain resolute. The EFF is going to make serious inroads, and as you can see, it's only 50% of the votes that have been counted. So it's still very early. We are going to definitely get a positive performance. The EFF has never disappointed since 2014, 2019 has been performing very well, and even this time it is definitely going to grow qualitatively. So thank you very much for tuning in, the people of South Africa, Africa, and the world. We have come to the end of the show. Now we are signing out with Shona Malanga from Jazz Hour Volume 5 as we wrap up this show. My name is Titus Tungu. Until we meet again, good day.
Awusesino 10 years emgwaqweni namanje ayeki socialism. Awusesino 10 years emgwaqweni namanje ayeki socialism. Emalema siyabuzwa ubunzima, malema siyabuzwa ubunzima, emalema siyabuzwa ubunzima, malema siyabuzwa ubunzima. Awusesino 10 years emgwaqweni namanje ayeki socialism.